Hello. After that extremely frustrating session in class, literally spent maybe 5 minutes before I figured out the issue. And fortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, is extremely simple. And I just didn't think that this would be the case. Under Windows, Settings and Preferences, and Plugin Manager, and why this is disabled by default when this tool is new and featured in my, I have no idea. But I had checked it loaded and auto-loaded, and apparently that crash turned these off. So Unfold3D.bundle is the plugin that's required for the 3D cut and sew tool that's new to Maya 2018. Anyways, Unfold3D.bundle loaded and auto load. Yay. All right, so that should make this work when I go through this method. But what we're doing here, just to review, is laying out some UVs for our character. So we're going to make a flat two-dimensional map that will help us map on a texture, a two-dimensional texture, onto our three-dimensional character. All right, so let's get started with that. I've already mirrored over here, and I have my base UVs here, which are not attractive. They are the basic cube UVs with a bunch of edits over the top of them, so there's just a tangled mess there. And so we're going to create just some base kind of simple projected UVs to serve as our starting point. So to do that, we're going to go to our UV menu up here. This is in the modeling menu set, and UV menu, we're going to go planar, projection, and option box. Let me just reset this, so we're using the same settings as you're having when you open this for the first time. And we're going to project from, instead of X, we want to project down the Z axis just to do a frontal planar projection here. And we'll go ahead and hit apply. Now let's bring up the UV window. While we do that, just make sure he's selected in object mode and hit apply. So it's going to project all of his UVs just kind of straight through. And that's great. We could certainly take this into Photoshop and start painting on it, and it would certainly show up on our character here. And we can see that checker pattern from our UV map. When I turn off default material there, that is mapped kind of nicely onto the front of our character. But as we pan around the side, we're seeing some issues. We're seeing this distortion, stretching, and then ultimately on the back, this is back-facing or backward UVs. So whatever we, let's say, painted in that map onto the front of the character would appear mirrored right on the back. You kind of see that with this V here kind of stretched out and then repeated on the back. O over here too, or 0 rather. So what we need to do is cut up some seams in this mesh to unfold different pieces of the model. You can imagine like clothing. So if you had a shirt and you tried to lay that flat without any sort of overlapping, the only way to do that would be to cut along the seams, or cut it in general to open it up and allow that to lay flat. If you kind of reverse engineer that, that's how the clothes were created in the first place. There's a flat plane of fabric that's cut according to a pattern and then sewn up to create a three-dimensional garment. So to cut these seams, we're going to use a new tool in Maya 2018. And again, you need to have Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. Make sure that Unfold3D.bundle is loaded and auto-loaded. So the next time you open this up, if this closes and saves that, you'll be good to go. It's worth checking, though, after that incident. You don't want to go through the same frustration I did. All right. So let's go into the 3D Cut and Sew tool, also available in your UV menu. And we'll just make sure that we are in object mode here, have our character selected, and then use the tool. So notice it says drag to cut, control drag to sew. So if we want to cut seams into our character, we can drag seams like this. I'm just left mouse dragging, and we can cut seams into our character. We can also, if we wanted to, sew those up. So maybe we make a little mistake here. We jog off of our line and we want to sew that up. You can hold Control and drag over those, and those will sew back up. We can also hold Shift and double left mouse click to, just like in our edge selection when we're modeling, to select an edge loop, and that will cut off that shell. All right, so since I'm going to be working symmetrically here, I want to turn on symmetry for this tool. So in the tool options, let's turn symmetry to world X, because our character is sitting right at the origin. So mirroring over X should work, and we can see a preview of that, and it looks like it's working fine. All right, so let's start by cutting off the ear. The reason we need to do this is because this is kind of a dense little area with lots of overlap. And if we were to unfold this, this area of the map would kind of get crushed down and it would be highly distorted. So cutting this ear off is going to help prevent that. I'm just going to go with a line outside this. I'm selecting these partial, or these short edge loops rather, just by double clicking on that edge, but we could just click and drag too. As soon as that shell has been cut free from the other shell, notice it changes colors to indicate. All right, we're also going to cut out, I've created eye and mouth cavity. You probably want to do that to mirror, just it can save you some headache, but this does work with open holes in the mesh too. However, just like with the ear, if we unfold this, these areas will kind of become highly distorted. Not a huge problem because we're not really going to see them, at least the eye cavity, but it's going to, that distortion is going to work its way out onto the eyelid, so we want to prevent that. All right, so we're just going to go to an edge, like basically maybe just inside the edge of the eyelid, and double click that, and that will cut those eye cavities off. And then we'll go inside the mouth cavity and double click an edge loop there, cut the mouth cavity as well. All right, so for the body, we're going to cut off the arms. We can kind of choose where we want this to lay. I'm thinking this edge loop should work. So we'll cut the arms off. And I'm going to start, maybe take a couple of these edges up to this edge loop that runs along that middle seam line of the fingers, like if you think of a glove, that seam line. And so I'm going to select one edge there and go down maybe to this index fingertip and double click that. And so we'll cut all the way along that arm. Now I'm going to bring that cut further down. You want to go to the tip of the thumb. So we cut that and then cut that. And we'll do one more edge right there. All right, so those arms are cut, good. Now for this little tank top section here, you can imagine that. We could leave the legs attached possibly, but it'll be cleaner and easier to cut those off. So let's go ahead and do that. We can use this edge loop here, or we can do just above that with these small loops. And those are cut off now. So with the legs, we want to cut down the inseam, and I'm going to cut down to the sole of the shoe. I'm also going to cut off the soles of the shoe. They're not going to be seen, so it doesn't matter. They don't need to be attached. We're not going to worry about that seam, but that's going to allow the legs to unfold cleanly without distortion. All right, and so for this body section here, we can unfold that. We'll just cut along the bottom of this, and we'll also cut a seam up the back, and that should be sufficient. Imagine how that's gonna unwrap there, keep the armholes, and kind of peel that flat. All right, so looks like we have kind of all the shells we need. Everything has a seam. Oh, missed one here. we're going to do the back of the head as well, because that would be pretty hard to unfold if you imagine. We're going to need a seam down the head. I'll start from where this is kind of buried under the hair and then go to the base of the neck. Double click. All right, cool. So we now have, and if we look over in our UV editor, all the shells we need. And we can select those shells in our UV editor. Just hit Q to get out of the tool, and right click and select UV shell. We're just going to do this all at once. So let's select all of this. And I'm going to close this out. And I'm going to shift right click and go to unfold and option box. You can also find that, I believe, under UV unfold. No, you can get to it in this menu. Shift right click, so marking menu in our 3D view, and we can get to unfold that way as well. I believe this is under tools, unfold here in our UV editor as well. So option box, and that's going to bring up our options here. I'm going to leave this on Unfold 3D, but again, we need that plugin loaded, Windows, setting preferences, plugin manager, and Unfold 3D.bundle, or this will not work. It'll actually default to legacy, which was what was happening in class. And this works well for directionally constrained unfold. So if you wanted to constrain it to the U or V direction, legacy can actually work pretty well. But for this method, we're going to leave it on the default options here. Let's reset our settings. Yep. So default options, Unfold 3D. The only thing I'm going to change here is to select pack. So it's going to pack our UV shells after they're unfolded without overlap into our active quadrant, our +1 to +1 UV quadrant. We'll go ahead and hit apply. And there you go. So now we have all of these shells. You notice that we're selecting symmetrically still, so we can turn that off. They give you a little hint here in your active view, symmetry, world X. In any tool, we can double click those to get to the setting, go to symmetry, and turn off our symmetry. So now we can select these shells individually, and it's going to, make its best guess as to how to pack these in. And the reason they're laid out like this is it's going to maintain the texture pixel density. So what we see in the 3D view should be reasonably consistent. So we have relatively consistent checker pattern size, so that these will all get similar size of our texture map. So the resolution will look the same throughout, and we won't have like larger, more visible pixels in one area than another. And so that's what the pack function does, is it tries to find an optimum placement for these things to achieve that. Now, if you want to take advantage of this map area and you want to work a manual pack in where, and maybe you want this organized in a different way, you can select shells and start moving these around. And if that works better for you, you just want to make sure again that in your 3D view that the density looks relatively consistent there. There's some exceptions to that. You could sometimes give maybe a little bit more density to areas that will be seen in close-up, like the face. It's common either to have that out on its own map or to have that larger, given more space within this map. And also things like these mouth and eye cavities. This is actually the ear, and here's the other ear. So we'll leave those as is, but for these eye cavities, we can certainly scale those down to tiny, because we don't need really much texture space for that. We just need to paint a tone on that. Mouth cavity we might want to leave a little bit bigger, but now we have more area in which to place these other shells. So if you wanted to scale up this this head map and give it a little bit more room in your map, you could do that. Just have more, slightly more texture map area dedicated to the head, so you could do this stuff manually. And sometimes, just doing that to have these things laid out cleanly, where you're not getting edges of your shells running up next to each other or running over or just to the edge of the map. Sometimes you can get some issues with texturing when you have those edges touching the edge of the map or touching each other. All right, so sorry that this kind of did not work in class, but again, super minor, annoying fix that just make sure, and I'll mention it again, that under Plugin Manager, Unfold 3D is loaded and auto-loaded. Once we have a map like this, we want to go ahead and save because it's a nice benchmark step in your process. And then in our next steps, we'll be moving on to use this map to create a texture. All right, hope that helped.